Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
At the end of the day, you got to have protein, but you don't want to underconsume fats. And a ketogenic diet, if you're trying to optimize from a ketogenic standpoint, you need to make sure you're consuming enough dietary fat, even if you have stored fat to lose. That's just going to be optimal from a fat adaptation standpoint. So I've tried to kind of speak out against that, but it's been interesting to see this massive push away from fat in ketogenic circles, because it's just like, there's so many, there's right? So many sub units of what keto is now. There's all these definitions now. There's a lot of confusion, which I feel is kind of bastardizing what the ketogenic diet is and always has been. So that's been a little frustrating to see unfold.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed CEO of Keto Savage, Robert Sikes. We discussed how he started his Keto Brick Company, how much protein is optimal, the key to creating a great sleep environment, how to get fat adapted, and his one tip to get your body back to what it once was. This was my second time around with Robert, and we pretty much touched on all things keto. So I really know you're going to enjoy this one. I did too. And thanks so much for listening. All right. Welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin, and I have a returning guest, Robert Sikes, on, CEO of Keto Brick, right? All things keto, probably, pretty much, right?
Yeah, man, I appreciate the opportunity to be back on a second time around. I was scoping out your website, and you've totally revamped your website since the last time I've seen it. It all looks really good, man. You're killing it right now.
Oh, thank you. And actually, I was scoping your website out, and it looks like you revamped everything as well.
Yeah. We've, I think I did that early this year.
Okay.
But yeah, just trying to make it all a little bit more professional, look a little bit more of a resource as opposed to just a landing page. So yes, indeed.
Yeah. I noticed you have like some guided workouts. You also offer coaching, and then there's a kitchen aspect with recipes, right?
Yep. Yeah, I basically want it to be like a one-stop shop for anybody that needs anything keto, especially as it relates to bodybuilding, body recomposition. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love it. And well, before we dive into a bunch of different topics, I think I found out about you through your Keto Brick. And I know that's been a great journey for you. Maybe tell the listener a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, so the bricks were never meant to be a product that I sold. It was something that I made kind of out of my own necessity back in 2017 when I was going through my first ketogenic competition prep for a bodybuilding show. And I just needed this was back in 2017, so it was before there was any products on the market. I just needed a really good, high quality, nutrient dense macro bar that fit the ketogenic macro distribution that was ideally shelf stable and wouldn't cause any bloat or GI discomfort on stage. Mm-hmm. So I kind of set out to craft my own products because there wasn't anything out there. And lo and behold, the Keto Brick came to be, and it just kind of took off. There's a lot of popularity and excitement around it, and there's been a demand for it ever since. So we just rolled up our sleeves and started production, and we've been making them ever since.
That's awesome. And for that to come about just through your own self-experimentation, what are some of the things that you've learned? Because I know that space is not an easy space, the health bar, if you want to call it the health bar space. What are some of the things that you've learned over the last, 4 years?
Yeah, well, one thing that we've done different compared to most health bars is that we've kept all the production in-house. Like most companies will outsource to a manufacturer, a co-packer, because it's less overhead expense, less headache for them. And they can mostly just focus on the marketing and the promotion. For us, since there's nothing else on the market like it, I didn't want to outsource it because then you would run the risk of the co-packer, decreasing the quality of the ingredients and trying to improve their margins. And the only way to really maintain 100% integrity in the ingredients was to do it ourselves. So we basically just bottled the kitchen equipment. We started out making these things in our house, then we started leasing a commercial kitchen space by the hour. Then we started leasing 3 separate commercial buildings. And now we just purchased this massive building that we've just recently moved into here in Northwest Arkansas. So we've kept all the production under our own roof from the very beginning. I have 100% oversight of everything that goes into the bricks, and we just make sure that it's 100% every single time.
Yeah, that's great. And you have a bunch of different flavors, and I like to use them strategically. How do you recommend using the Keto Bricks for individuals that are just getting started with it?
Yeah, so I mean, it all just depends what everyone's unique calories and macro distribution looks like. I typically do a little bit higher fat distribution, and I'm taking in quite a few calories. Like my maintenance intake's probably around 3,000 calories a day. So I'm anywhere between 3,000 and 3,500. So I'll typically eat one whole brick a day, and I'll do 2 meals. So I'll typically have half a brick with my first meal around lunchtime and my other half with dinner. And that's pretty much how I get my fat macros in. That combined with a good quality meat source, protein source, and I pretty well hit my goal intake for the day.
And on that note, how did you come about with? I'm always curious, because I actually one of the topics I want to talk about was calories and counting calories, and is it important? And it's something that I don't really do. I sort of just feel it out during the day as far as how much I should eat and how satiated I am. How did you come about for yourself? You said 3,000 to 3,500, and I'm sure it varies depending on if you're training for something. But how did you come about that number?
Yeah, so mostly just trial and error, self experimentation. Like if you are happy with how you look, if you're healthy and you're following a healthy, well formulated ketogenic diet, you can be fairly intuitive with your intake. You can just listen to your body's hunger and satiety signals, stop eating when you're full and eat when you're hungry. And that works really, really well for many, many people. I can do that when I'm in more of a maintenance phase, but when I have a very specific goal in mind, whether that's leaning down for a competition or trying to ensure that I'm in a surplus for a building phase, I'll typically track my intake to get things dialed in, especially when I'm in a cut. Because when you're trying to get to sub 5% body fat, you can't really do that intuitively because you're going to intuitively just be hungry and want to eat more.
Right.
If you do that, you're not going to get to that level of leanness. So I'll track very, very strategically when I have that specific goal at hand. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, just to establish my 3,000, 3,500 maintenance intake is I'll just gradually titrate calories up until I start to notice some adverse effects, more fat gain relative to lean mass gain. And that's where I'll kind of know that I've exceeded my maintenance intake basically.
Gotcha. And are you doing for your managing your body composition? Are you doing like a DEXA scan or something like that?
Yeah, DEXA scan, in-body scan, caliper test. Plus, I've done this so long now. I'm really in tune with my body. I know based off of how I look in the mirror, what my body fat percentage is at any given point usually. And then I'll, that'll put me within about 2 percentage points. Then I can do a DEXA scan to hone it in even more.
Okay. So obviously you're in a weight gaining mode right now. You putting on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be in a building phase until probably November of next year.
Oh,
and then I'll start cutting down for the next competitive season.
gotcha. Okay. So a whole year of weight of putting on how many pounds do you plan on putting on?
It's going to be different for everybody. Once you've been lifting for quite some time, it's harder to put on just sheer mass year after year because you have that muscle maturity. You've got your body's so used to that stimuli of training. You don't really get those newbie gains indefinitely. So I'm happy if I put on a couple pounds of muscle, a solid muscle a year. And that's like legitimate lean muscle tissue, not, fluctuations in water weight that's going to show higher lean mass. But yeah, if I put on a couple pounds of muscle a year, I'm happy.
Okay. So you're doing this, and then when is your next competition?
Probably like April of 2023. I think I've got a show lined up then. And I'll probably try and have a few shows pretty close together so that I can just capitalize on that cutting phase. Cause it takes, 4 to 6 months worth of time to get to that level of conditioning. And then I'll stay there for a very finite period of time. And I'll start reversing back up to a healthy maintenance, and then eventually a surplus. So yeah, I'll probably start dieting down in November of next year and then compete probably April of 2023.
Now, when you're doing your building phases, you mentioned you have 2 meals a day. Do you sometimes increase the amount of meals you have per day to put on the weight as well?
Yeah, if I'm kind of a more aggressive building phase and I'm 3,500 calories or better, then I'll typically break that into 3 meals a day because getting 3,500 calories in 2 meals is just a lot of food in one sitting.
Yeah, that's what I notice. I usually have on, for maintenance. I'm not training for anything like you, but I usually do two meals a day for me is good. Occasionally one, But I find with one that like you mentioned, it's tough to get the right amount of protein that you want for the day, especially if if it's a workout day, obviously as well.
Now that contrasts that with a cutting phase, and I'll typically do like an OMAD approach. So I'm
Right.
only eating one meal a day. Oftentimes, when my calories get much lower, and to me, that's more sustainable and more enjoyable than having just multiple tiny meals throughout the day.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I find, yeah, I'm more productive when I'm not eating during the day. I feel like I could do other things, and um, you know, I like to do all. If I do add carbs into my meals, I'll do them on the back end of the day. How do you what type of carbs do you add into your meals, if any?
Not really any. I mean, I'll probably
Yeah.
take in, 12 to 15 grams of total carbs a day just from trace sources. There's some in the Keto Bricks. There's some in like the vegetables that I eat, but I don't really consume anything with the intention of eating it for the carbohydrates it contains.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I remember that from last time. I've become, yeah, I feel like once you've gone low carb, um, going back the other way, I don't know. I don't feel like it's necessarily a thing. I mean, you're seeing this with some, and this is maybe another topic, but you're seeing this with some of the individuals who are like carnivores and like Paul Saladino and people who are starting to add in some carbs. Maybe they had some effects, maybe their thyroid or whatever. Is there sometimes do you add in like honey or anything like that, or have you kept it pretty low carb the whole time?
Been low carb the whole time. I haven't had a carbohydrate meal in probably 7 years or better.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of these issues that you see people, arguing in favor of introducing carbs like fruit and honey from a hormonal standpoint,
Hmm.
often stems from them chronically under eating to begin with. If people are consuming adequate calories and have a building phase, um, not to say they have to be a bodybuilder by any means, but just simply consuming at a surplus for a time, that usually does wonders to regulate their hormones and their metabolism, and they don't really have the need. There's no need for the inherent increase in carbohydrates to improve that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And is there certain protein amount that you target every day? Because that's always something I hear. I mean, obviously, high high protein is becoming I keep hearing it more and more as a favorable thing. Obviously, I always tell a lot of my clients to prioritize that for each meal. Is there certain a protein amount that you like to target?
So a good rule of thumb is to just be consuming 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass, kind of as a baseline, and
Hmm.
then go up from there based off of what your goals are. If you're training heavily, things of that nature. There's occasionally times where I'll dip below that, but it's only for a very, very, very finite period of time during the last few weeks or month of my competition prep, in which I'm just taking calories very, very low. But then I keep my dietary fat relatively high, all things considering, so that my body is not really catabolic from a muscle wasting standpoint. So I can tolerate that lower protein for that very short period of time without any adverse effects.
So 1 gram of protein per lean mass, correct?
Yeah, now I'll typically go quite a bit north of that. Like right now in my building phase, I weigh about 175 pounds. I'm typically eating at least 200 grams of protein a day. With the building phase that I'm in. But yeah, I don't see any benefit in people consuming under 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass, unless it's for a very strategic, short term thing, like in the context of that competition prep protocol. But just for a day to day sustainability standpoint and just maintenance, there's no need to go beneath that.
Okay. And then, yeah, per 1 gram of lean mass. So if you weigh, let's just say 170, you're not going to be 170 of lean mass, obviously. You're going to maybe
Right.
be, let's just say 140 of lean mass, and that would be
Right.
a target.
Exactly.
Okay. And you get some of that protein, obviously, from your keto bricks, which, the nice thing about the keto bricks, you know exactly what you're getting,
Hmm.
right? And then you probably add in a steak or something like that to get the rest in.
Yeah, I eat a lot of red meats, a lot of ground beef, a lot of steak, a lot of eggs, some fish. But yeah, I pretty much get a pretty varied source of protein. But I'm definitely a fan of the ruminants. Like the red meat, the deer. I do a lot of hunting, so wild game also.
So you eat nose to tail pretty much.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I certainly try to consume everything, especially if I harvest it. If I kill deer, I'm taking everything I can off of that. And I'll eat a lot of organ meats. I don't like organ meats though.
Yeah, I do. I actually recently I just my wife made liver and onions. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I mean, you make it the right way. I mean, I know obviously you don't want to overcook any of this stuff because it takes some of the nutrients out of it. But it was I would have it every week.
Yeah, liver's really good. I've been doing a lot of like beef tongue is actually pretty good. It tastes like when you shred that up, it tastes really, really
Yeah.
good. But yeah, liver is a pretty good recipe. The main thing is just not to overcook it, like you said. I mean, a lot of that, especially liver, is fairly lean. So if you overcook it, it just becomes very chewy
Chewy,
and
right?
not near as desirable.
Very tough. Yes. And you're the second person to say that they've enjoyed tongue on my podcast. Actually, I had a guest on, James Berry. Have you heard
Mhm.
of the company called Pluck? Have you heard?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I
I had
had
him on
him.
my podcast as well.
Oh,
That Pluck seasoning is amazing, by the way.
yeah. You know what? It's great. It is great. I've been putting it on my eggs, and
Hmm.
it does well. It does well on fish too.
Yeah, it's really good. It's got he calls it the umami flavor, I guess is how you say it.
Yeah. It's
But
like a
yeah, it's got a very very deep flavor profile.
Yeah, yeah, it's a nice product, and just like yours, which was first to market, no one really had anything like it. His, I've never seen anything, like an organ-based seasoning.
Hmm.
I don't think I've seen that in the market at all.
Yeah, no, what he's doing is good. I mean, I hope he keeps killing it, and there continues to be a demand for it.
Yeah, and okay, and then on another note, we were talking a little bit before. Um, what are your thoughts? Obviously, and you mentioned it, like the low-fat keto movement that's going on a little bit now. Tell me a little bit about what differing opinions are regarding fat.
Yeah, so it's been interesting to see this unfold because I got into the keto space a long time ago. It was like 7 years ago or so, and there wasn't really much content around keto when I started putting out content. There's a few people, but there wasn't that much. So I've kind of seen the evolution of the ketogenic diet and community unfold over the past 6 7 years.
Hmm.
And when I first got into it, it was all about kind of more of a therapeutic ketogenic approach. So very very high fat, lower protein, and relatively low carbs, but still quite a lot of vegetation, fibers, vegetables. And for a while there, people were scared of protein. They were scared of the word gluconeogenesis, and they would underconsume protein, which obviously isn't optimal. And I kind of fought against that. And now the pendulum has swung so far the other direction that people are starting to become fearful of fat, and they're giving protein a halo and consuming protein in excess and not enough dietary fat. And I've tried to fight against that as well.
Mm.
At the end of the day, like you got to have protein, but you don't want to underconsume fats. And a ketogenic diet, if you're trying to optimize from a ketogenic standpoint, you need to make sure you're consuming enough dietary fat, even if you have stored fat to lose. That's just going to be optimal from a fat adaptation standpoint. So I've tried to kind of speak out against that, but it's been interesting to see this massive push away from fat in ketogenic circles because it's just like, I
That's
mean,
the whole
there's so
point of
many,
it.
yeah, there's so
Right?
many sub units of what keto is now. There's all these definitions now. There's a lot of confusion, which I feel is kind of bastardizing what the ketogenic diet is and always has been. So that's been a little frustrating to see unfold.
Yeah, and I wonder why that's coming about. Maybe it's just another way for people to make money to sell
Probably.
different products, right? Like it's because obviously when the whole keto craze came, and it's still there, um, all these products that probably aren't the best things to have, are hit the market, and people thought, oh well, it's healthy. It says keto on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy, right?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that were, the coaches, the influencers, the people on the tip of the spear in the health and nutrition circles were very much so the bro dieters and the flexible dieters and the people that did traditional high protein, carbs still and very low fat. And then keto came and made all this, commotion and gained all this momentum. And a lot of these people either talked against keto very, very hard, or they started to adopt a ketogenic approach, but then kind of had their own traditional bro split on it. And now that they've kind of gained some traction by leveraging a ketogenic approach, I feel like they're starting to kind of return to their roots of more of a higher protein, lower fat, baseline. And I feel like, again, nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can lean out, you can lose body fat, you can get healthy with a variety of diets, but I feel like blurring the definitions so much so that nobody really knows what's what anymore, what's up and what's down is just confusing the general public and not really doing anybody any favors.
Right, because when you're confused, you never really do anything.
Exactly.
you know, um, what would be your arguments for having a higher fat diet, and higher saturated fat and healthy fat diet, as opposed to what's happening maybe a little bit in the keto space where people are going away from that?
Yes, I mean, protein is, like I said, incredibly important, but protein is not a great substrate for energy. You can get your energy through carbohydrates, you can get your energy through fat. If you're keto adapted, you can get your energy through protein, through gluconeogenesis, but it's not an efficient process. So your body's ability to generate energy from gluconeogenesis, from protein, is never going to be optimal from an energy substrate standpoint. So if people are trying to eat carbs, then it would stand to reason that they would need less dietary fat, enough to function properly, but less so than if they were taking a fat adapted approach. And again, if people want to go the carbohydrate direction, they're not insulin resistant and they function great, then more power to them. But if you're trying to optimize from a fat adapted or ketogenic standpoint, you obviously don't want to have a whole bunch of carbohydrates in there, kind of diluting things.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to have so little dietary fat that your body's inefficiently using protein as the primary fuel substrate. So it's been, I mean, for me, I've always encouraged people to eat ample calories so that they can fuel their body properly. There's been this massive push for just incredibly low caloric intake and chronic under eating. And, you see this a lot with the, protein sparing modified fast crowd who recommends sub 1000 calories on a regular basis. That's just not enough food to really function optimally with. So if you're eating ample calories and you're eating enough protein, then it makes sense to make up the remaining calorie balance with quality dietary fats.
Yeah. And if you're not, let's say an individual is not having a keto brick, where can they get those fats? Obviously, you can get them from having, a ribeye obviously has healthy fats in it, and things like that. But where else could they get their fats from?
Yeah, all kinds of sources like avocado is a really popular one. Any of the monounsaturated fats, olive oil, avocado oil. I do a lot of animal fats like duck fat is really good. Pork lard is really good. Beef tallow is
So
really good.
you'll cook in that, obviously.
Yeah, and then just I choose fattier cuts of meat. And if you're sourcing the animals from a good quality, place that's consuming a good, meal plan, like if they're grass fed, grass finished, they're going to have a more favorable fatty acid profile in the actual animal fat as well. So it all kind of gets up regulated.
What is your opinion around like chicken? Is that something that you have? Because um, I would put red meat ahead of chicken all day, just from a nutrient profile and just I think a lot of times with chicken, you can have high omega-6 profile as well. Is that, what are your thoughts around chicken, and is that something you have in your diet?
Yeah, so chicken and pork both are both monogastric animals, kind of like us humans. So basically, they're kind of more of a they are what they eat kind of scenario. So if they're eating poor quality food, that's going to
Right.
be carried over into their food, like their muscle tissue, which we're then eating. Whereas like a ruminant, like a cow or a deer, they're going to be able to eat a little bit lower quality food and kind of upregulate that nutrition as opposed to being just they are what they eat scenario.
Right.
So I always try and make sure that if I'm eating a lot of chicken or pork, it's coming from a good quality source that is, free range chicken. Eventually, we're going to start raising our own chickens, so I'll know for sure where my food's coming from.
Mm.
But yeah, sourcing of the food that we eat and knowing what they eat is definitely important.
How do you cook your eggs?
I fried eggs, simple fried eggs. I'll put some cast iron. I'll cook them in a cast iron skillet, put some olive oil down, and just fry them up.
Okay, because that's another thing. Like, you hear like scrambled eggs or omelets and things. When you break up the yolk, you tend to lose a lot of the nutrient profile of it. And I was looking into maybe poaching them or doing something different with them.
Yeah, poaching is good. I mean, I just prefer scrambled eggs. I do like an over easy. So, or not scrambled eggs, but fried eggs. So I'll do an over easy, and then I'll put that over top of a, you know, plate of ground beef or something of that nature, and then that yolk just helps flavor all the rest of it.
All this food talk, and yeah, maybe we'll switch topics because I'm still fasted right now. um, let's actually touch on what's your opinion about micro workouts. This is something that I've adapted into my workout routine. And I'm curious, obviously you've been in bodybuilding for a long time, because I was actually just did a little trip with my wife because we just got married last year and we went on like a delayed honeymoon in California. So I've been using, had him on my podcast a few times, the X3.
Mm-hmm.
And for the last year and a half for the quarantine, I've been using that and just doing quick, hard workouts with that. And it's been great, actually. But it was sort of nice to get back to like a traditional gym and doing some of the traditional lifts that I used to do. And I worked out longer because I was, sort of on vacation, had more time. But I'm just curious, how do you go about your workouts and your belief sort of in these, micro workouts?
I think micro workouts are great. I think any movement and stress and stimulus towards the muscle is better than no stress and stimulus towards the muscle. So if you're, cramped for time, you don't have the space, you don't have a gym, then simply getting something in with a micro workout is most definitely better than getting nothing in. I prefer like a traditional bodybuilding style workout in which I'm training for an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. Usually not quite 2 hours. Usually I can get a workout in a solid hour and 15 minutes. And I'll typically do a body part split in which I've got a targeted muscle group that I'm really focusing on that day, that workout. And I'll try and have a mix of, more of a hypertrophy style training where I've got a little bit lighter weight with a little bit more repetitions. And then I'll also throw in some heavy, compound primary movements in there with a little bit less repetition, but heavier weight, just to kind of stimulate those deep muscle tissue fibers more so than I would if I was doing a lighter weight. So kind of pretty traditional when it comes from a training standpoint.
Yeah, that's what I figured you would say, and that's how I lifted it for a long time. And I think it's good to mix it up. And like you said, any movement is better than no movement. And I'm curious when you say, how many reps are you doing for hypertrophy? Are you doing like 8 to 12 or 12 to 15 in that range?
Yeah, like when I'm doing, more of a hypertrophy focus, I'll try and do between about 10 and 15 reps.
Okay.
And then when I'm doing like a heavy deadlift set, for instance, I'll typically cap it at about 6 or 8 reps.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. And as far as sets, are you doing like around 3 to 4 sets in that range?
Yeah, normally 4 sets. If I'm doing lighter repetitions or fewer repetitions and heavier weight, I'll oftentimes do more sets. So like deadlift squats, I'll go as high as, I'll sometimes do like 10, 12 sets total, just progressively getting heavier and heavier.
Got it. Okay. And then thoughts around like blood work people should get, maybe if they're starting out. A lot of my clients, I'll do a DEXA scan, and is there certain recommended blood work that you do for yourself or for your clients?
Yeah, I recommend, if people have the means to getting like a full comprehensive panel done every 6 months is a
Mhm.
really good practice to get into. I need to kind of take my own advice on that. It's been a while since I've gotten my last hormone panel, lipid panel, but yeah, a fully comprehensive hormone panel and lipid panel is always good. A C-reactive protein test would be good. The A1C is a good test. But yeah, I think I've been trying to find a good way of doing this that I can scale and kind of keep track of. And I think Dave Feldman just came out with his own testing blood test panel company. So I'm going to look into that. But here lately, what I've been doing is I'll just go to directlabs.com, purchase, whatever panels I want to get. And then I'll get those tests drawn at like a Quest Diagnostic Center. And then I'll keep track of all that with a software called Heads Up Health.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I was going to bring that up. Do you like that Heads Up Health? It keeps it all in one spot, right?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it goes beyond just the blood panel. So you can actually sync a lot of your wearables, like how you can sync your Oura Ring or your macro tracker. And the beauty of that is that you can kind of chart all these things that are normally not, syncing and talking with one another, but you can chart out those over a graph to see, what's correlated or not. So like I can use my Oura Ring and then track that with my macro tracker. And I can see that if, hey, my calories are down pretty low, like in a cut, and my sleep starts to wane, sleep quality, they're probably correlated there.
Yeah, really cool. That's neat. So it sort of syncs all your devices into one.
Exactly.
We have so many wearables now, and you don't know what to keep track of.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings on the wearables. I think it's good to get a baseline to see where you're at, but it's like the only person that knows best is probably how you feel, right? Like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. There's a certain demographic of people that they'll put full faith in these wearables. And if the wearable says, hey, look, you should take it easy today. Don't train, don't do anything, exhaustive, then they take that as the word of God. They don't lift a finger. And that to me is a little bit, that's putting too much power in this device. Like I try and always focus first and foremost on how I feel. And then if that just happens to align with what my wearable says, then, well, then great.
And you're using the Aura Ring, is that right?
Yeah, I've got the Oura Ring. I've contemplated getting the Garmin watch more so from like a GPS coordinate standpoint for like when I'm out hunting. But I have not used the Garmin watch.
Okay. Yeah. The only one I've used do you use CGM?
Yeah. I've
Continuous
played
glucose.
around with the NutriSense CGM, and I've done several 2-week stints of using it to kind of see how things affect the numbers, and that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. And that's a continuous glucose monitor. I did the same thing. I did it for a couple of weeks and I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, I don't know if I need this on me all the time.
Hmm.
It's like once you get a feel for it, because I don't know about you, but like I eat the same stuff. I'm
Yeah.
pretty boring, right? So it's like, how much feedback do I need if I'm eating the same thing almost every day?
Yeah, same with me. I mean, my diet doesn't really change too much on a day-to-day basis. Now, I could see there being a benefit to the CGM when I'm doing a competition prep or I'm strategically manipulating one variable of my nutrition. And for people that don't really know what foods affect them, I think that would be an incredibly valuable tool. But once you kind of have that figured out and you're able to be a little bit more intuitive, then you probably don't get near as much value from it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I use the Whoop, and the Whoop is nice. I think it's good to track sleep.
Hmm.
But again, how do you feel like, um, how do you go about getting optimal sleep? Because I obviously it's like everyone that I have on my podcast is like, okay, what should we do to change our health? Well, let's opt. I had Rob Wolf on. We talked a lot about sleep. What are some of the things that you do to get optimal sleep?
So my sweet spot's about 7 hours a night, and I wake up usually around 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, that's right. I
So I
remember
typically go to bed.
that.
Yeah, so I wake up pretty early. So I typically go to bed around 8 p.m., which is pretty early by most people's standards. But
Hmm.
I wind down by 8 p.m. That kind of works out pretty well from a circadian rhythm and natural sunrise sunset standpoint as well. At least as far as my bedtime is
Right. I was
concerned.
gonna say, I don't, yeah.
Yeah, the
Your
sun's not
sun
up
is
here.
rising at 3 in the morning. Where are you living?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll do that. And then one thing that I found to be a couple just, quick fixes for sleep is I'll turn my thermostat way down to like 63, 64 degrees. It's total darkness. It's completely blacked out in my bedroom. And I'll use the mouth tape. So I'll use micro pore tape and I'll just tape over my mouth, which forces me to breathe nasally throughout the night. And as opposed to breathing through my mouth. And that's been pretty helpful.
Interesting. You hear something new. I mean, I've heard of, so you put mouth tape on.
Hmm. Yeah, basically, I learned of this through Mike Mutzel. Basically, what happens is when you don't have that mouth tape, or if you're prone to opening your mouth while you sleep, your tongue moves and partially blocks your airway, which is going to cause you to pretty much subconsciously arise from a deep sleep. So, because you're kind of moving and shifting, try to open up that airway. So your tongue's moving. It's just not optimal from a deep sleep. Whereas if your mouth is taped and you're breathing through your nose throughout the entire night, then that airway is never blocked and you're able to fall into a deeper sleep and stay there a little bit longer.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that even for like walking and stuff, right? I mean, like you want to really focus on breathing through your nose.
Yeah, I don't tape my mouth when I'm just walking around, but I
Can
do
I use that for my
definitely.
wife? No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, I do definitely try and breathe through my nose whenever possible. I've tried to go through entire training sessions and
It's
only breathe through
tough.
my nose, which
It's
is very
tough.
hard. Yeah.
I've tried that, and it's like after a while, I'm like, okay, I don't, I need to breathe through.
Yeah, it's tough.
Maybe the more you do it, you get used to it.
Yeah, that's the case
But
for sure.
yeah, um, yeah, and I do agree on creating a sleep environment, like you mentioned, dark, cold. Now that it's getting colder in Chicago here, I don't even need to do that as far as creating much of an environment. It gets pretty cold in where we live because we have sort of higher ceilings, so the heat all
Hmm.
goes up, and yeah, it's definitely makes sleeping a lot easier. That's a good hack.
I've thought about investing in one of those chili pads or one of the 8 sleep beds that has the temperature thermal regulation.
Right.
I just haven't been able to pull a trigger on one of those yet. I haven't been able to justify it.
Yeah, I mean, we moved into a new place not that long ago, and I looked into that mattress. I never got it, but I do like our mattress. It is cooling. It's not like a cooling mattress, but all in all, it's been good. I think keeping a dark, cool environment is so key. Um, what about morning routines? I mean, you're up 3:34, and I'm obviously a big routine guy. I think we may have even touched on it last time we talked, but I'd love to hear what your morning routine is like.
Yeah. So right now, I pretty much I wake up, I read a little bit, And then after I read for 30, 40 minutes, I start writing. So I do a lot of my creative writing work in the morning. I'm writing a book right now. So I'll allocate
Nice.
like an hour or so to work on that. If I'm not writing, I do a lot of my client work in the morning. So I'll do that. But normally I'll do that until about 6 o'clock or so, which is when the sun starts to peak out over the horizon. I'll have coffee with my wife on the front porch, watch the sun come up, and
Mm.
just kind of plan the day. And then we, from there, head to the compound here and start. We have a morning meeting with all of our employees, and we just start
Start
tackling
make
the day.
start making those bricks.
Exactly.
um, yeah, that's great. I get up, I take my dogs for a walk, and then I come back and usually do some reading.
Hmm.
What type of books? What book are you reading right now?
So I'm reading a couple. I'm reading Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. And
Nice.
then I'm also reading, I just finished Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules for Life. That was a good one.
Okay.
And then I'm reading Stephen Ranella's American Buffalo book currently.
Oh, interesting. So you got a few going on.
Yep. Yep.
I know you mentioned a little bit. I saw on one of your blogs about that. Did you have the Sam Apple on your podcast?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That was a really good conversation. He's the one that wrote Ravenous. And that was I mean, that book was a very good book. So I wanted to get him on the show and just kind of talk about the motivation behind him writing it.
and that was regarding the starvation diet in the Holocaust camp, concentration camps, right? Was that what the book
It
was
wasn't
about?
so much the starvation diet so much as it was,
Like,
it was all about Otto Warburg and the Warburg effect and how that all came to be from how cancer metabolizes
wow.
sugar and glucose, basically. So very, very interesting read.
Hmm, interesting. Okay. Um, awesome. And what would you say to someone starting out, maybe wanting to get into keto, and get into even, working out, and, and we're getting now to the new year, people are going to start setting goals and wanting to sort of change the way perhaps they've done things over the last year. What would you say good first steps of, just first and foremost, maybe getting into sort of a keto style diet?
I mean, honestly, just prioritizing nutrient dense, wholesome, single ingredient foods is going to be first and foremost. People that are first now, I mean, right now coming into keto, they're going to be incredibly confused by all the information out there and just the conflicting information out there.
Yeah.
So I think really just kind of buckling down on what is sustainable for them. Like if they have, an addictive personality and they have trouble moderating their carbohydrate and processed food intake, then they probably would be better off eliminating those foods and not having it as an option. If they don't do well with certain foods, just taking that out of the equation altogether. But always prioritizing, just good quality, wholesome, single ingredient, natural foods is going to be the best bet for anybody. If they're trying to go a ketogenic approach and they're not yet fat adapted, even if they have quite a bit of fat to lose, then making sure to make up that void in calories after the restriction of carbohydrates with dietary fat in the context of also eating enough protein is going to be very important as well.
Yeah. And you talk about getting fat adapted. Perhaps we can touch a little bit on that. How long do you think it usually takes someone to get fat adapted? And do you use certain like wearables and things like this, like a ketone meter or things like this to sort of track that?
You don't really have to track it per se. It's kind of nice to track because it gives you something tangible to look at and know that you're on the right direction, on the right course. So, testing your blood sugar, testing your blood ketones would be good for people that just don't know what their body's doing with that food yet.
Hmm.
As far as a length of time is concerned, you're going to start producing ketones within about 24 to 48 hours after you stop eating carbohydrates. But simply producing ketones and having a lower blood glucose doesn't necessarily mean you're fat adapted. Usually, I would recommend people spend, at least 4 weeks or better before they start deviating from that, if they are ever going to deviate from that.
Hmm.
What I've found is that the length of adaptation just keeps getting, you just keep getting more and more adapted the longer you're doing a ketogenic diet. I mean, I've been doing this for 6 or 7 years now, and my level of adaptation now is significantly better than it was after doing it for 6 weeks, which was not as good as it was after doing it for 6 months. It just keeps getting better.
Yeah. And one of the things I find with being fat adapted is energy
Mm.
levels, right? Like that's the one thing I noticed to myself is, um, I mean, I'm big into fasting, intermittent fasting, and I sort of vary it depending on the day. But like I think we had some type of family event, and I just felt like I should have something to eat there. And I didn't eat anything that I didn't. It's like I had like a bagel, but like I think I had some tuna salad, maybe some lox and some things like that. Things that nothing that processed, but I felt it after that. Like it's amazing once you get fat adapted and you get into some fasting, like just how much energy that you can have throughout the day. And if for me, I like to save my my meals towards the end of the day, not too close to when I sleep, but I think that just goes a long way with just being productive.
Yeah, I think, once you know what feeling good is like, you're much more in tune with what feeling poorly is like. A lot of people just don't allow themselves to feel really good, so they don't have that perspective, they don't have that context. But once you do, it's like, wow, I don't ever want to deviate from this because I could feel and function much better.
Yeah, you just find like you're so sensitive to like any little change that you have in your diet. That's not the mean. Like we were just in California for 10 days, and we're used to cooking every meal. So that was definitely like we had great meals, don't get me wrong, and it was great. It was just like towards the end, I'm like, I wouldn't mind to just make a plain simple steak and
Hmm.
because even if you're going to a nice restaurant, it's like for the most part they're using a lot of vegetable oils in
Yeah.
cooking your food. There were a few times where I did ask if they could cook it in butter, and that's something that everyone could do. Is you can that never hurts to ask. But even these high end restaurants, they're definitely, I would say, majority of them are using cheap vegetable oils to cook in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you may come across as a bit more annoying or so to the server, but I think simply just taking control of your own health and not leaning on excuses and just asking, and then if it's possible to manipulate a few things in the back in the kitchen so that it's more in line with your nutritional goals and healthier lifestyle, then it's totally worth your time and effort.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I think nowadays you won't sound annoying because I feel like there's so many restrictions just regarding like allergies and things like that. I'm sure the last thing the restaurant wants is is something to go wrong. If you're allergic to some, whether it's nuts or whatever. But I usually just tell them, I say, I just can't have those oils. I have a bad reaction. So
Yeah, totally.
then maybe then they'll change the way they cook in.
Absolutely. I feel like the oils. I mean, that's something that's gotten a lot more in the limelight here lately, which is
Yeah.
good. Because people just assume that all fats were created equal, but really focusing on the types of those fats, which is more inflammatory than others, and kind of drilling down and prioritizing the ones that are healthier, I think is time well spent for sure.
Yeah, no. I mean, you can go a long way just for I always say just cook for yourself and just know what's in your food. And the people I know, I have some clients and they're eating out all the time. And it's like, you know, can you reach optimal health if you're eating out all the time? I don't know. It's a good question. You could improve, but I think to really get to maximal health, cooking for yourself is the best way to go.
Yeah, 100% agree. And there's a lot more to cooking for yourself than meets the eye too. I mean, it kind of completes the whole circle of life much more so. And in my opinion, I'm probably gonna get a little poetic with my hunting background, but I feel like knowing where your food comes from, knowing how to prepare that food, and just appreciating that entire transition. I mean, that's valuable information.
Yeah. And I probably asked this last time. This is normally what I asked most of my guests is if you were going to give a tip to individual who wanted to get their body back to what it once was, what one tip would you give that individual?
Um, I think trying to really understand why they want the body they had before in the first place. Kind of taking more of a mindset approach. A lot of people have goals, but they're not able to execute on those goals because they're not they don't have enough weight or significance or importance in their mind, but really kind of fixating on the why and then visualizing the process that takes to get there more so than just simply having a goal. That way you can execute on it on a day-to-day basis once motivations don't exist. I mean, there's going to be times where you're just simply not motivated to eat properly or motivated to go to the gym, but having the discipline to execute on those because you have a deeper underlying reason as to why you want to reach that goal in the first place is going to be key.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, we always talk about all the how-tos, but the whys is that's what really drives you. And unfortunately, people wait till a lot of times, they have a health scare
Mm-hmm.
until they actually take action, which, at that point, it's probably a little bit too late. Not to say that's not too late, but you should be thinking about it a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Robert. Well, this was fun.
Yeah, man. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity.
Yeah. And where's the best place for people to find out what you're doing and what's going on in your life?
So any and all things Keto Savage. So ketosavage.com for the website, Keto Savage on social, ketobrick.com for the bricks if they're interested in those. But yeah, Keto Savage.
All right, Keto Savage. There he is. Robert, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Brian. Always a pleasure, man.
All right. Hey, Get Lean, Eat Clean Nation. Are you a man between the ages of 40 and 60 years old, looking to lose inches around your waist, have significantly more energy throughout the day, and gain muscle, all while minimizing the risk of injuries? Well, I'm looking for 3 to 5 people to work one-on-one with in my Fat Burner Blueprint Signature Program, which I've developed by utilizing my 15 years experience in the health and fitness space. This program is designed specifically for those committed to making serious progress towards their health goals over the next 6 months. We will focus on sleep, stress, nutrition, meal timing, and building lean muscle. If this sounds like a fit for you, email me at brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. That's brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again and have a great day.